Okay, today we're going to be talking about the multiplication properties of exponents, day two, the second one. Before we dive into that, I really want to make sure that um, we remember our first two rules. Our first rule said if you have, it was the product of exponents rule, if you have the base being the exact same and it being multiplication, then all we have to do is simply keep the same base and find the sum of the exponents or add the exponents. So we would get 2 to the 11th power. And then the second rule we learned was the powers of power. The powers of power rule said that if you have a base with an exponent and then that all was taken to the 7 to the, if 7 to the fourth was all taken to the third power, then that was the same as finding the product of those exponents, or multiplying those together. We'd get 7 to the 12th. Today's new lesson is the power of a product property. Okay, and this power of product property, um, it's kind of a combination of both. What we're going to see in this one is you're going to see parentheses just like you did on Rule 2. But instead of having one base number, we're going to have multiple numbers inside the parentheses. So you might see something like x, y, and all of that to the third power. What this means is that it pretty much is going to, this third power is going to distribute to everything within there. And so what you would get is x to the third power, y to the third power. And again, that is different than what we did. This is what we did yesterday, which was a power of power. And that was something like this. So notice we only had one base number in here. Here we've got two. And these are to the first. Okay? So we're still actually multiplying these exponents. You're still getting 3 times 1 and get 3, 3 times 1 and get 3. Here we would take 4 times 2 to get 7 to the 8. So our new rule says we're going to have multiple numbers within this parentheses, and each number, that exponent will distribute to each one of them. So if we look at this example, notice the multiple base numbers that you have inside of here are the 5 and the x, and the 2 is going to distribute to both of them. So you're going to have 5 to the second power, and then x to the second power, and then that's taken again to the second power. 5 to the second power is 25. And then this is an example of our rule yesterday. It's a power of a power. So you're going to multiply those two together, and you get x to the fourth. Look at this example here. Now we have three numbers. We have 3x and y squared, but those are our three bases, so the cube is going to go to all three. You're going to have 3 to the third power, x to the third power, and y to the second, which would be to the third power. So you can almost see these as three individual things. 1, 2, 3. Oops, 3. And each one of those three things are going to get the third power. So 3 to the third power would give us 27. X to the third power, and then y to the second power to the third power is an example of a power property that we did yesterday. So we find the product of these two, which would give us y to the sixth. And then finally our last one, again we have 1, 2, 3. So the negative 2 is going to go 3 different times. It's going to go to our a squared, our b, and our c cubed. So you're going to get a squared to the negative 2, b to the negative 2, and c cubed to the negative 2. This is a power of a power. 2 times negative 2 is negative 4. b to the negative 2 stays the same, and then 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Continue with some of our examples. This is a negative 3 The 2 is going to distribute to both it and the x. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So we have -3 to the second power, and then x to the second power. -3 to the second power is -3 times -3, which is +9, and x to the second power is just x squared. This time the negative's on the outside, which is a little bit different. What we're going to do is we're going to apply our new rule first. We're going to get an answer, and then whatever we get, we're going to have to tag that negative back on it. So we're going to kind of ignore the negative at first. So we get 3 to the second power, and then it distributes x to the second power. 3 to the second power, 3 times 3 is 9. X to the second power stays as x squared. So then we tag that negative on, and we get -9x squared. And finally, our last example, the 3 will distribute to both of these. We're going to have x to the -2 to the third, and then we're going to have y to the 0 to the third. We've got a power of a power, so we find the product of those two. So you should get x to the -6. And then y, this is also a power of a power. 0 times 3 is 0, so we get y to the 0. And again, for now, we're going to keep this y to the 0 as just y to the 0. Tomorrow we will talk about what that exactly simplifies down to, and how we can take this one step further. And for today, this is where we're going to stop. Okay, that's it for today. I hope the new property went well, and we'll go over it in class tomorrow.